Hello and welcome to another Atypical Philosopher video with myself, Jonathan M.S. Pearce. Another look through the extra nuggets of the Ukraine war and discussing elements to do with the conflict as I wade through social media so that you don't have to, and hopefully stimulate some discussion in the threads to talk about the points I'm bringing up. Anyway, the biggest piece of news, I guess, was the widespread destruction caused by Iranian drones and cruise missiles sent into Ukraine as a whole, into the cities of Ukraine to try and take out infrastructure. And I've talked lots about this over the last few days and about how inaccurate they are and about what explains that inaccuracy. I won't go over that again. Please check out my extra videos from the last 2 days. But there are definitely, issues with drones hitting Ukraine. Here, Tim White says Mayor Vitaly Klitschko says that 28 kamikaze drones were fired on Kyiv. 23 were shot down with only 5 landing. So the 5 that are landed have caused quite a bit of uproar because they've generally hit in different places and maybe not hit the exact targets they're aiming for, or some of them shot down over Kiev, and all sorts of stuff going on. So we'll find out exactly what infrastructure has been hit in the coming hours. But those numbers are really interesting. So if 23 of them were truly shot down, that is really good air defense. Now, Kiev is, being the capital of Ukraine, will have the best air defense. So when you're starting to get these air defense systems sent in, the NASAMS, and then we've heard that the French and the Spanish are sending in systems, although the Spanish is slightly older. And we're starting to see missiles, AMRAAM missiles from the UK being promised. The air defense systems, too late, I have to say, are being upgraded in Ukraine such that their capability is now a lot better. Is that is that reflected in this statistic here? Quite possibly, quite probably. But you're still getting 5 landing in the capital, which is a long way from the front lines. And when you start looking at the footage that's now coming out of places that have been hit right up and down the country, this is Mykolaiv, where the sunflower oil, has been hit. You've got 15 tons of sunflower oil flowing down the streets from storage tanks hit by drones. This is not great. When you've got a drone, as you can see from this, I'll just show you that again. Coming down into there. I mean, that must be pretty frightening to be in the city. Imagine being in your local city and seeing these kamikaze drones coming down. It's an idea of control. You just don't have control over this situation, and that must be quite unnerving. So anyway, there's a huge amount of footage coming out of kamikaze drones being sent all over the shop. So these really are the weapon of choice at the moment for the Ukrainians. And I talked to you in previous videos about the number of cargo planes that have got through. So this is one being sent into the center of Kyiv. So literally anyone with a gun is firing at this drone to knock it out of the sky. But of course, it's still going to land somewhere. And unless it's going to explode in midair, then that's highly likely to detonate on the ground. So either way, it's not great, is it? But you can see all the flashes of the drone. And that's your kind of last-ditch effort to take these down, is your small arms fire. They are apparently using autocannons as well on top of things like the Gepard. I don't know if it's actual Gepards, but here's an example of an air defense system that uses radar and then has an autocannon on top that's got about a 5-kilometer range. So they're starting to use those to try and bring these things down. But again, you have to have these placed, all over the shop in order to hit one of these things. They really need to be flying, fairly close to whatever's firing at it. But as I was saying, sorry, before I interrupted myself, is that Iran has sent over an absolute bucket load of cargo planes to deliver these, with each cargo plane having perhaps 100 of these drones in. You're thinking that that's a lot of these drones that they have manufactured and are giving to Ukraine. So people are now calling for the ATACMS to be provided, which are these much longer range missiles that can be fired out of HIMARS and other such systems, and have a 300-kilometer range, so they could hit the Kerch Bridge, with missiles, for example, and they'll be able to hit these installations. The idea that the US, for example, aren't providing these is that it would be escalatory. Well, hang on. Everything that Russia have done is escalatory, and that we have provided greater and greater weapons, and it hasn't. Russia is still doing the same thing they were doing at the beginning of the war, right? Sending in cruise missiles willy nilly. So the idea that it's definitely going to be escalatory is actually perhaps moot. Now, there's a special worry today, and I talked about this in my update video this morning. There's news that Iran are going to send over ballistic missiles. So these ballistic missiles are cheaper, and perhaps even more accurate, more precise than the Russian cruise missiles being used at the moment, or at least they're certainly cheaper than most of them, if not all of them, and more precise than some of them. The Iranians claim that the CEP is even. I mean, I heard that they've got about 100-meter CEP. So I talked about circular error probable. So you have this circle with a radius of whatever, and if you got 100-meter or 300-meter CEP, it means that you can fire a missile, and it is precise if 50% of them hit within 100 meters of your, or 300 meters of your target, depending on what the precision rate is for that missile. And if these ones have got a 5 to 10 meter CEP, then that's exceptional. Of course, that's what the Iranians are saying. If some other people say actually it's more like 100, it's up for debate. But they have produced some, and I'll show you some propaganda videos or some kind of like marketing videos, if you like, for this weapon. But these can fire 300 to 700 kilometers. So that is, if that's the case, then, and Iran does get these ballistic missiles to Russia, that's a real worry, because they can be made cheaply, and they can be made with pieces of equipment that are not sanctioned. So Iran has been sanctioned, obviously, but those sanctions still allow the commercial electronic stuff to be imported into Iran. And if you can make weapons using these kind of commercial components, then that's your way of getting around the sanctions, and that's what they've been doing. So that's a really big worry about these weapons. So as this tweet says, Iran is preparing to send the first batch of Fateh 110 and Zol Fakhar ballistic missile systems to Russia. They have a range of 3 to 700 kilometers, so Russia will surely fill its depleted ballistic missile stocks with Iranian missiles. Western powers should really reconsider the ATACMS now. I completely agree. I don't see why ATACMS are not in play. It's because if you're talking about escalation, the only escalation Russia has is nuclear missiles, right? Well, chemical warfare. But I don't think they would do that just on ATACMS being used. It's not like, oh, they've used a couple of ATACMS missiles, therefore we're going to blow them up with nukes. So I just think ATACMS should have been in play for a long time now. Elint News says it's substantially more advanced than the Luna M, which is essentially an unguided artillery rocket. These are short-range ballistic missiles with a range of 3 to 700 kilometers and a high accuracy of 5 to 10 meter CEP. Playing down Iran's weapon capabilities has always been a pet peeve of mine. So this is someone who's just, don't play these down. If you have adequate air defense to shoot these down, which Ukraine doesn't, only a few S-300s, and I don't know how many are still operational, they are going to seriously damage your infrastructure and military targets. Bucks these are other type of surface-to-air missile, might also be able to give it a go, but that's about it so far. And of course, they do have NASAMS, and they are getting these Hawk and is it Kratol from France. But you need a lot of systems if you're trying to protect every city in Ukraine. Think about the number of pieces of equipment you're going to need to do that. So here's your map of Ukraine, and if they're even hitting places like Lviv at the moment, again they're starting to hit places on the west. But certainly, Sumy, Chernihiv, Kharkiv, Dnipro, Kryvyi Rih, Zaporizhzhia, Mykolaiv, Odessa, of course, all of these places are in play. Then you're thinking, right, we need several systems, a bunch of systems around each of these cities and major points of infrastructure, nuclear power plants or thermal power plants and substations. If we're going to protect all these places, then we are going to need a serious amount of air defense systems. And that's going to be what the Ukrainians are screaming out for. Iran conducted strikes using Fateh-class ballistic missiles and artillery rockets turned into Fateh-class ballistic missiles and Shahed 136s on a mock-up of Israel's Dimona nuclear reactor last year. The results speak for themselves regarding accuracy and destructive capability. And it's worth, watching that video here. So remember, this is Iranian marketing. So, see it how you will, but the capabilities are clearly there. These are serious pieces of kit. Slightly smaller ones as well. That is a big rocket. And there you go. That is what those missiles can do. And if Russia have those in their hands, and a lot of them, then they're going to be in trouble. As well as using those drones. And those drones are, they are plentiful at the moment, it seems, and causing, heaps of trouble. This is the police in Kyiv, trying to shoot down a drone as it comes it almost directly hits them. You can hear the other shots. Whether they hit it and that's what brought it down just there, I don't know. But that's the sort of stuff that's going on. Right, to move away from that, and I did talk in the previous video this morning about people calling on Israel now to help out, since Israel and Iran don't get on. And if Iran are helping out Russia, then perhaps it's Israel's turn to properly help out Ukraine. So Israel have condemned Russia's activities, but they haven't really helped out hugely militarily. And they are quite a technically advanced military force, and they would have a lot of tech and information. There is some claim that they are providing some real-time information for Ukraine, but I think Ukraine would like a lot more hardware. Here's an example, just to move sideways a little bit. Here's an example of another type of munition. Now, this is, well, the claim is it's a phosphorus, Russian phosphorus bombs on a Ukrainian village. Phosphorus bombs and other incendiary bombs are not, I don't think they're necessarily illegal in terms of the sort of Geneva Convention kind of thing, but they are generally frowned upon. And you'll see why. I mean, imagine having this come down and look at the way that they burn as they hit trees and things. every one of those sparks being able to burn and cause fire. You know, luckily, obviously, it's not in the summertime, but yeah, that's pretty hair-raising stuff, and using that is yeah, as I say, frowned upon, but not illegal. But I'd hate to be sort of seeing that rain down from above. And now I'm going to show you a video that you might say, why am I showing you this? This is kind of glorifying war, and so this is the Kraken Special Forces unit, just involved in gunfighting. And what I want to do basically is show you, when I show you maps like this, oh, this is what's going on in Kherson, in northern Kherson region. We're unsure of who's controlling what. This is what the Russian state of front line is, and this is what the Ukrainian state of front line is, and it's probably somewhere a mix of both of those with a lot of grey zone. Okay, so when I'm saying things like that, what that means, what's actually happening there on the ground, if it's not like large bits of equipment being used and mechanized units being used, then it's people running around shooting and being involved in life-threatening maneuvers that are really, really scary. Now this is up in the Kupiansk area, but my point is that'll be what's happening on the lines up there, right? I won't show you the end of this video because it's inappropriate. There's stuff that I wouldn't be allowed to show you anyway, and I wouldn't want to show you. But this is just an example of the kind of stuff that goes on.
Давай, крою, блядь! Давай, хватит коня, блядь! Работай, не забывай, Ну, Юра, возвращайся! Контрольте выезд!
So these guys are going to be running on adrenaline to a great degree and kind of going on autopilot, just hyper alert, hyper vigilant. Just so much to kind of think about here. But here, to look at this line of mines, and you've got to negotiate your way past them, just thinking about all these different hazards that are potentially around, and trying to stay alive whilst also, completing your objective. I never quite understand how people can just be standing. I've seen this quite a few times, sort of thing, where people are shooting, and it seems like often it's suppressing fire. So you're just kind of firing in a general direction, not particularly aiming at something, just keeping the other heads down whilst you do stuff your end. But then you get guys that just seem to be standing. I'd be cowering in the undergrowth as being as cautious as possible.
Да. Есть, сука!
Obviously hitting something that explodes over there, or sending a grenade over.
ВК, ходим! Пехота, не забываем, техника, может быть пехота.
Right, I'm going to stop it there because you start seeing some inappropriate things. But there you go. That is what war is, right? But it just gives you an idea of like when I'm talking about lines on a map, those lines represent human beings putting their lives on a line on both sides and dying, and that's the reality of this and the horrors of war. So there you go. this is. I watched this yesterday, and I just saw it, and I didn't have the sound on, and I watched it and didn't really understand what was going on. I was like, oh, here's some guys just driving really quickly down a road. And then I watched it today and I was like, oh, okay, this is quite interesting. So have a look here. So first thing to note is that you've got a nice clean dashboard here, uh, and a nice, windscreen there. And what happens is shrapnel. So these guys, I think, are just suddenly trying to get away um, from artillery fire, probably that's dropping around them. And I think what they say is, "You alive? I'm okay. Stop, stop. All good."
Газуй!
Вон, я бачу.
Дивись на дорогу, щоб карандаші.
So now you can see there's some damage there, and there's a hole through the window, through the windscreen, and so a shrapnel has come through after a hit, after some kind of artillery explosion to the left, and has come through and hit them. And I think right at the beginning of the video, you do hear, like, I think it's the sound of an artillery gun going off, but I'm not 100% sure. And he might well have been hit by that shrapnel, so that shrapnel could now be in him. I'm not 100% sure. Yeah, that's that sound right at the beginning there. Anyway, so I just thought that's interesting to see. Here, I won't show you on the right because it's not appropriate, but I showed you one on the left. It's just kind of weird, I guess. So, if I can actually, yeah. So what's happened here is the tracker's been hit. Oh, why does it keep coming on? The tracker's been hit, and the engine's still going, and this tank is just basically going round and round and round, and has caused like a spirograph circle, and yeah, I just nothing other than, I don't know, just something to look at there. But there's a tank that's in a bit of trouble, but still going endlessly. Okay, a few comments from my video yesterday which are worthy of pointing out. And I talked about the old maps theory, and I didn't mention this, which is kind of what the old maps theory is. If you don't understand what I'm talking about, go and look at the update extra video yesterday where I talked about how the Russians appear to be using, at least to some degree, very old maps, some from the 1970s, and that could explain why they are hitting civilian targets that used to be military bases. And this guy's saying, actually, it's a slight variation on the old map theory. It's an old list of targets, and this is absolutely right. So this is all part of it, but I probably should have expressed myself better. Russia is assuming Ukraine operates like they do, and government buildings pretty much last forever in Russia. I would not be surprised to find out that some portion of the Russian government was paid to do intel on Ukraine, and they simply pocketed the money and handed them an old list. Maybe they added a few obvious targets, but they might not have double-checked the targets on the old list. So upper command was given a list of targets. They're not going to triple-check the validity. This is really super important. So the reason why these civilian targets are being hit is not so much because they're using old maps, and they could still be having some degree of quite poor satellite imagery. But if the intel is saying this is somewhere we want to hit, right, and it kind of looks like a bunch of buildings on your up-to-date satellite imagery, but you're not 100% sure what that building is being used for, but some guys handed you a target list saying that building is being used for military purposes, but that list really is like 40 years old, then they're going to send off a rocket to hit that, and it takes out a bunch of civilians. Russians aren't particularly bothered that it's taken out a bunch of civilians, but it is a kind of waste of a rocket from a strategic point of view if they have so few rockets. But it's not so much the old maps, but the old list, the out-of-date list. My view is that the same corruption has been destroying Russian military effectiveness, and that's at play. No country would launch an invasion without an updated target list. When you can take all the time you want before starting an invasion, spending 6 months gathering intel is probably the most critical task. Someone was told to get a list together. They probably started with an older list, then due to corruption, sloth, and or hubris, didn't verify the older target. So this is such an important point, and I'm going to expand on that a bit. And that's to say that when they invaded, and I talked about this in previous videos and articles that I've written, when the Russians invaded, they were expecting a 2-day deposing of the government and 15 days to mop up. They weren't going to hit anywhere, the cruise missiles. That wasn't even part of the remit. That wasn't part of the plans. Nothing like that. Then the Ukrainians didn't welcome them with open arms, didn't welcome them with bunches of flowers, and in fact, it was a war that they weren't expecting. And because now there was a war, they're like, oh my goodness, okay, everyone bring out the cruise missiles that they didn't have ready. They didn't do the 6 months of intel like this guy suggests. And thank you, Kashandrith, for this comment, excellent comment. They didn't do all the intel gathering because they had the bad intel of the notion that Ukraine would welcome them with open arms and it would be a really easy disposal of the old government and an imposition of a new puppet government. Then you're in a situation where you're at war. Quickly, get me a list of targets. We've got to hit these guys, and you can't do the intel because now this is a war zone. So you can't send people in to find out what's a base and what's not a base because this is a war zone, and those places are controlled by the Ukrainians. So it's very hard to get like spies working in there who are pro-Russian. So they're working on old lists. And then you get the problem of hitting the wrong targets. So great comment there. And another comment here, which is really worthy of discussion. So this, thank you from Jorge Badisa. Dear all, let's put, and I haven't fact checked any of these claims, any of the stats, any of the numbers here I have not fact checked. However, the point, it doesn't matter whether these are exactly right or not. The point is absolutely worthy. Let's put 500,000 people summoned to the service. So this is talking about the mobilization of the Russian troops. They need a minimum of 1 summer combat uniform and 1 winter combat uniform, 2 summer boots and 2 winter boots. That's a total of 4 million boots. 500,000 belts and a 1 million minimum underwear. Okay, it's things you don't necessarily think about this, do you? 1 million gloves and something that here in South America is called the white gold of the troops. I'm talking about toilet paper. Calculate 250,000 rolls every 2 days. That's a minimum. Food in combat in Central Europe, autumn, winter, 1.5 kilos per person every 24 hours. Hot drinks, tea or coffee, 500,000 litres per day. I'm not going to touch on the topic of alcoholic beverages. Add helmets, 500,000, AK-74, millions of bullets, gloves, which you already said, combat harnesses, anti-shrapnel vests, millions of handkerchiefs, etc. In terms of health, bandages, dressings, antibiotics, thousands of litres of serum, blood and other fluids, analgesics, hydrocolloid heel patches for recruits not used to wearing combat boots, and much more. Ammunition, lubricants for weapons. Is the Russian government in a position to provide the above promptly, regularly, and punctually? What an amazingly important comment this is. So hats off to this guy. And on the one hand, it's super obvious. On the other hand, it's so obvious that perhaps we're not thinking about this enough. So we talk about logistics being hit, and it's such a difficult thing. They're a railway army, and they are being forced to use trucks. They don't have many trucks, and they started the war with about 4,000 trucks, where the Americans would have 100,000 to do the same job. And then loads of their trucks broke down, and they've been captured and blown up, and so on. So they are logistically hamstrung. Add to that the sheer volume of stuff they need to get to the front, not just ammunition, right? Not just artillery shells, but toilet paper, clothes, bandages, blood, everything, all up and down this entire line. So, like, where are these guys in Kherson going to get their toilet paper? Honestly. So then you add this together with what the ISW, Institute for the Study of War, said, and this is a week ago. So mobilization and force generation efforts, Russian objective, expand combat power without conducting general mobilization. So this is what they said on October the 10th. Okay, mobilization in Russia continues to face bureaucratic and logistical challenges. Russian court records suggest that years of corruption and petty theft of military supplies among Russian military personnel has rendered the Russian Ministry of Defense unable to provide mobilized troops basic necessities such as protective equipment, weapons, medical and personal supplies. The BBC reported on October the 10th, by the way, they cite the evidence for all of this with their footnotes. The BBC reported on October the 10th that Russian military garrisons have sentenced at least 558 men for clothing theft and have made 12,000 fraud convictions and over 700 embezzlement convictions over the past 8 years. Stolen equipment includes millions of rubles worth of goods ranging from bulletproof vests, boots, and diesel fuel to soap, toilet paper, and socks. The data from these convictions likely represents a small subset of corruption in the Russian military. The governor of the Russian Mariel Republic acknowledged the Russian MOD's supply problems impacting mobilized troops' promise to fix the problems and attributed the challenges to ignorance of the mobilized men's needs on October the 9th. And this is an absolutely, this fits completely with what we know about the corruption, but also adds compounds the issue of just needing to get those supplies to the front line as it is. When you add corruption to that, it becomes even more problematic. I remember reading an account from a new Russian conscript or a new I don't know exactly what he was, a soldier that was just come to the front line nearer the beginning of the war, right? So this may have been sort of April time, March, April time. And he's saying that we're really struggling for logistics. So we're getting like 2 trucks in a day and to the front line. And I'm like 30 kilometers back from the front line, he was saying. This is my memory, so, I might be wrong. And he's saying that all of us here, no, well, not him, he was just watching what was going on because he's brand new to this. He said all the people around me were taking their stuff from the trucks. And this was for the people on the front line. And they were 30 kilometers back from the front line. And they were taking all the best stuff. He said what was left was like 1 pallet in each truck that had like the poorest cigarettes. So not the best cigarettes, the poorest cigarettes, and like a bunch of bare minimum food and stuff. And then they sent that to the front line. So the guys that needed the supplies the most, the guys that were actually doing the fighting on the front line, were being embezzled basically by their own troops 30 kilometers back who were taking all this stuff and using it themselves or selling it. So then what would happen, they were saying, that they would then sell it to the people on the front line. So your own Russian comrades taking the good supplies and then sending you the crap stuff and then coming to you later and saying, oh, do you want some of that good stuff? I'll sell it to you for this. And then you're wondering why they're going around looting, right? Okay, that you've got the whole washing machine sort of scenario where they're looting stuff to send home and make money, but just looting general food and toilet paper, stuff to live by, because their own troops are doing them out of supply. So that's really fascinating as an anecdote from near the beginning of the war. You add it together with the fact that you got 3 to 500,000 to maybe 1 million. There are all these figures floating around about how many people will be mobilized. But it's not as if these troops are suddenly going to solve all the Russian problems, because they'll bring problems with them. A lack of training is obviously one of them, a lack of morale, but also the need to live. And if you suddenly are going to put 500,000 people up and down here, then you've got to think what 500,000 people need every single day to exist. Not just the one-offs like bulletproof vests and clothing and all that, but the stuff they need to replace, things that deteriorate, but also your food, your toilet paper, your medical supplies, all those things. And we already know there's a report that's coming out today that's saying that the Russian training camps are finding out that the people they're getting in now are desperately, desperately unfit. So they're finding out that they're like 30, 40 years old, but they're, people from the office, people that, imagine you took a cross section of US society, right? And I don't want to talk about obesity and fitness levels, but just take the cross section of US society and you started taking, I don't know what it would be, like 1 in 20 people, just randomly, 1 in 20 people. You don't know how healthy they are. 1 in 20 people, you can take all those people and put them into training camps for 2 weeks and then send them off to the army. You're going to have people that can barely do the bleep test, and that have got medical conditions that are just not fit to fight. They're too old, having all sorts of issues that will then affect the effectiveness of their unit, but also the morale, loads of knock-on effects. And that's the issue with this kind of mobilization. And apparently the feedback from those Russian trainers is that, my God, these guys are super, super unfit. And this is a massive problem. These guys need to be able to run, and they need to be able to crawl, and they need to be able to do all this stuff, and yet they can't. At least not effectively. But there you go. those are my nuggets for today. Thank you for listening. I hope that was of interest. If you found it interesting, please like, subscribe, share, and all that stuff. And I keep saying all this. You can help support the channel by the YouTube thanks below, buy me a coffee, PayPal, all those kind of very generous things. If you have the ability and wherewithal to do that. If you don't, just thanks for being here with us, and take care. And I will see you tomorrow.